Okay then folks, it is time once again to vote for a brand new Ark creature. This time we are looking for something for Genesis Part 1, although I wouldn't be too surprised if it ends up showing up on other maps as well. While of course Genesis is the only map with a water boss, this has been an overwhelmingly water-based top 10, with only one of the prehistoric counterparts not being at least heavily aquatic. As always, you are encouraged to vote for the prehistoric creature here rather than the specific suggestion put forwards, as quite often they are more of a collection of ideas that the author came up with rather than a fully fledged focused design, and of course wildcard can change whatever they want. But we do know they at least read the suggestions and use them to influence the eventual design, so it is still worth taking a bit of a look. Now, my voice is starting to go a little bit today, so hopefully doesn't make this too hard to watch. But with that out of the way, let's get on with our traditional details and bad jokes, starting with our first finalist, the Atopodentatus. This is a Triassic-era semi-aquatic herbivore with a peculiar hammer-shaped jaw, which our suggestion here takes, well, quite literally, using it to clobber and stun targets following a chargeable dash attack, while its long tail serves as a dual-purpose knockback for enemies or a handy whip for allies. Aiming a bit more onto the utility side of tames rather than combat, the Atopo can create targeted pools on land or an AoE pulse underwater that both heal and cleanse allies of debuffs, and both of these can be charged up to increase potency, although it will cost you a fair bit more food to do so. Taking a bit of inspiration from extant reptiles, we get a bit of a basilisk lizard thrown in here with some water running and climbing, and a bit of marine iguana with the production of a passive saline goo that can be fed to unconscious creatures, helping hide them from predators. As far as taming goes, we're looking fairly similar to a Moschops, with a passive feeding of randomly selected food groups. Although, should you fail this, unlike a Moschops, it won't simply wait around for its next one, and will instead swim off looking for food on its own, often getting itself into a little bit of trouble as it goes. Next, we have the Romaleosaurus. This pack-hunting pliosaurid aims to whip up a storm, quite literally, with a set of whirlpool-based attacks. Able to generate its own if none are naturally available, the Romaleo can enter these vortexes to give itself a speed boost and hurl itself out at nearby enemies. Spin of the tail produces further mini swirls used to immobilize enemies, or a blast of bubbles to knock them away. It's a fairly simple taming process for this one, with a quick feed and ride rodeo style, and the saddle is designed to hold a set of small oxygen tanks, either refilled at the surface or emptied to provide a quick breath for the riders, or even a bit of a getaway boost like an underwater tropeo. And finally, to add to our list of wonderful features here, it's from Yorkshire. What more do you need? Our third finalist back from the centre vote is the Saivodus, although with a few slight tweaks. Its previous thrash attack still remains, allowing it to grab and throw smaller targets or latch onto and tear chunks out of larger ones, providing a handy damage boost for nearby tames. In addition though, on kill it will now get stacking a chum buff like a Karkar, which boosts its capabilities, and is accompanied by 2 small swarms of flying fish, similar to how the Desert Titan has its flocks. By entering a turret mode, which makes you temporarily static, these swarms can be directed at appropriate targets, with enemies being damaged and slowed, and allies being healed over time. Like the Saivodus itself, these fish are boosted by the damage buff from the latch attack and the chum stacks, but as an addition, if you are full of chum stacks, you can instead spend them all to make the fish swarm around the Saivodus itself, creating a sort of protective ball which rapidly heals it and damages anything that gets too close. Up next we have the Tullimonstrum, a very old, bizarre looking creature with a magnetic personality. Not too unlike myself, of course. Unlike me though, this could actually be a pretty useful thing to have around. Able to use its camera-like eyes to reveal creature stats in a similar fashion to HLNA, or manipulate magnetic fields to not only allow it to hover around, but collect and distribute nearby dropped objects into local storage. Its magnetic jaws can be used to pull itself towards opponents, grab and throw players around, or in a pinch can be used as a sort of rescue extraction should its owner's health drop too low, picking them up and making a quick getaway to safety. Found in the lunar biome, feeding on gas which it can expel as either a sticky bomb or to temporarily boost its travel height, the Tullimonstrum can be tamed in a similar method to the Andrewsarchus. Just throw a bit of ambergris out to lure it over, and then grab hold and don't let go until it finally just gets used to your presence and decides to accept you. Again, just like me. For our fifth, we have another familiar face with the giant stick insect. Effectively unchanged from its Valguero suggestion, this tree cosplayer would now be found in the bog biome instead. Refusing to reveal itself while a survivor is looking its way, any intended tame must first be lured out of its disguise with a sufficient quantity of honey, slowly getting a bit too sticky until it can't close up again, at which point you can finally step forwards and actually give it some direct food. A wonderful symbiotic addition to your garden, the stick insect can be teamed up with either a domesticated beehive for defense, or an Archaeopteryx to provide a healing buff to nearby invertebrates and boost its natural sap and woody chitin generation. To help keep it hidden in the Genesis simulation, its natural disguises will now change depending on which biome it's in. A burnt tree for the volcano, a snow-covered one for the snow, and in the ocean, well, it just pretends to be a floating log, really, drifting along, ignored by all the other sea life, as a sort of living raft. Back again, all the way from the aberration vote to lurk in the bog, is the Palaeoctopus. Heavily redesigned to adapt to the different biomes, this many-armed friend has now turned its suckers to potion craft instead, using its inks to create a host of different consumables. Spending time in a particular biome, or more preferably simply feeding it an appropriate item, will allow the octopus to attune and start producing specific types of ink, which can then be turned into offensive or defensive potions. The bog pots provide an insect repellent for friends and induce torpor in foes. Volcanic bottles grant fire resist, or can be thrown out as a Molotov cocktail. Ocean inks are used to boost swim speed or enrage and blind opponents. Snow potions help you resist the cold or freeze your enemies solid. And for the lunar biome, we have an increased jump height and radiation resist, or an immobilizing black hole. Aside from potion craft, the inks can also be used to coat the octopus's own attacks, providing armor penetration, fire or frost damage, a bit of damage reflection, or a radioactive coating on its skin. As you would expect, it's not really the quickest creature to get around on land. But like any good octopus, it is, of course, a dab hand at climbing walls, blending itself in, and grabbing hold of any unsuspecting players. For our surprisingly one and only dinosaur in the top 10 this time, we have the Irritator, a smaller Spinosaurid named not for any aspect of itself, but because the paleontologists that studied it were just that annoyed by the fossil dealers they acquired it from. In-game? Well, that name really depends on which side you're on. Thanks to a thick mucus coating, the Irritator is immune to all negative status effects, a feature that it can temporarily also bestow to allies via an anti-irritant consumable. For those on the receiving end, though, it's a bit more appropriate, as they will have any existing debuff amplified and a temporary boost to any torpor infliction, giving it a purpose as both a taming aid and sort of a force multiplier when paired with other select species. A pelican-like throat pouch will allow you to easily snag those monster coelacanths that seem to be absolutely everywhere, and gain either a short health regeneration boost or just simply directly deposit into any fish baskets that you put in its inventory. Acquiring this power though is, well, it's not for the faint-hearted. As in, a bit of a twist, survivors have to eat rare flowers to make it ignore them, at which point you can then begin feeding it whole fish bodies, assuming the rest of the local residents don't manage to take them away from you first. Now, if you were thinking these votes can't surprise you anymore, then let us introduce the Crinoid, another not quite a fish out of water. The only shoulder pet on our list here, the Crinoid is a sea lily that has adapted to life in space and acts almost like a sort of biological exosuit, wrapping itself around the survivor's chest when not in use. Able to extend its feather-like fronds out, it can provide a protective umbrella against weather or temperature effects, allows some limited levitation, or use what seems to be its main strength in a photon beam attack. Aside from looking like a bit of a mini Death Star with beams converging on target, it seems to function somewhat similar to a tech phase pistol. Although admittedly this is a bit of an educated guess on my part, as the submission didn't really go into huge detail on this. What we do know for sure though is that the attack requires ambergris to use, something which it actually passively filters from the air, and also allows it to store perishables for extended periods. The Abyssosaurus is a huge predator, adapted to life in the darkest depths of the ocean. A tame whose name appropriately means bottomless lizard, as it truly has a bottomless list of features. Starting with its passives, we have increased damage, resistance, speed, stamina and health regeneration as you get deeper and deeper down, but decreased damage and stamina when near the surface. It's immune to Nidaria and Electrophorus stuns, boosts nearby plesiosaurs, scares away megalodons and Zephyctinus, reduces item weights when in water, gains speed around whirlpools, and its bioluminescence is so hypnotic that if you should get close, all other visible lights will fade away until it is the only glow in the black gloom. That same bioluminescence can also be actively used though to hypnotize creatures into completely ignoring attacks, being turned off entirely to cloak itself, or supercharged to remove fog and blind opponents. A sonar scan detects max level creatures, generatable whirlpools entrap enemies, and when lumbering around on land it can fire a water shot which causes targets to go into a blinding rage and lash out at everything around them. It even comes with a few new items to go with it, as aside from its oxygen providing saddle we also have a low level temporary scuba tank, and then a new plankton resource / ambient creature which can be harvested for use as a light source or to create an underwater flashbang that gets used in part of its taming process. And finally, another returnee from the centre vote hoping to grab your attention, we have the Pemphix. This is again another suggestion focused around support and healing, with the Pemphix producing a Daedon style heal pulse to those around it and charging an ability bar as the health ticks up. Once this special bar is maxed out, it can then be temporarily attached to a single tame, providing an overcharged healing and complete invulnerability in a very similar manner to its inspiration, the Team Fortress Medic. Now, as a crustacean, it is not just limited to the water, although certainly preferring it, as it can swim, walk and climb its way across all terrain to provide those heals anywhere it might be needed. It even has a little bit of range support, in the form of a water jet attack that heals allies or damages enemies. In fact, there's only really been one change made from its previous creature vote appearance, which is the addition of lobster meat, acting as both a seafood equivalent to mutton and a chewy, high-strength medical brew when eaten by survivors. Although, should you find the rare, higher-level blue lobster, you'd probably be better off just letting it grab you for a bit of Tuso-style taming, rather than chopping it up for dinner. And that, my friends, is the end of our Wet and Wild Top 10. There's clearly a community hope for both more healers and ocean-going tames here. And who knows, Perhaps after seeing this, maybe one day we'll get an ocean-themed map come to Ark. What a crazy thought. As always, please do make sure to order your entire top 10 when you are voting and not just pick your favourite, as once a creature gets knocked out, your vote will then pass to the next one in your list instead. And there is just only so many times I can explain that a third-party website is not rigging the votes simply because the creature that started in first place didn't end up winning. Please, just do it for me. For my sanity. If you've made it this far, I do hope you'll consider dropping a like or subscribing, as it really does all help me out. And you wouldn't want to miss out on my bi-yearly video now, would you? That is going to be all from me now though, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.